Hello, my name's John, and some time ago I decided I'd like to install a grey water tank under my caravan. So I went straight to the internet for some how-to advice, and while there was a lot of useful info available in writing, there was very few videos that showed any detail except under a little camper van. So I decided I'd make a video as I did mine of how to install a grey water tank under a pretty standard caravan. It's a very amateurish video with lots of wobbles and shakes in all the video footage, and I've probably missed a few bits out, but I hope it offers some help to others that might wish to undertake a similar project. This is the floor plan of our caravan. It's pretty standard. You walk in that centre door, and on the right hand side you've got the kitchen sink, and across the back we've got our shower, washing machine and vanity. And you can see the fridge there on the left hand side as you go into the ensuite. In our van, we've got a centre door, and you walk in, and on the right hand side is your sink. You then go through to the ensuite, which goes across the back of the van. So we go into the ensuite, and we've got your vanity there and the washing machine under that lid on the right hand side there. And then there's a shower tucked around here in the corner. So that's the general layout. Mainly everything's across the back except for the sink. And later on it'll become, you'll see what I've done with this gauge, but I actually put the grey water tank level gauge above the fridge where I thought it looked pretty tidy, and I've come up through the cupboard underneath that fridge with my wiring. And really any half-handy handyman could do this without too much trouble. And that's where I've come up through the floor inside that cupboard. This schematic shows the pipework before and after. What's drawn in dark pencil is how the pipework was originally on the caravan, which just shows a flexible hose from the sink picking up the shower main line. Then it comes through, and that main line picks up the vanity and the washing machine. Then it goes straight out to a grey water outlet pipe where I've put a cam lock fitting. The purple biro shows the alterations I've made, and really it's the Hep V valve on the main line, and then the T running up to the top of the tank, an outlet off the bottom of the tank, and an air line, an air vent going up. I purchased a 110 litre grey water tank, a single water level gauge with a 5 metre sender cable from Northern RV in Melbourne. The grey water tanks supposedly have a lower outlet which drains better than just a regular water tank. It's got an inlet up at the top, an outlet down at the bottom, and then it's got a vent line. There was one other fitting which I simply blocked off because I didn't need it. This next bit of footage shows the original plumbing as best I can show you. It is under the van, goes straight across the back, and those two inlets are the washing machine and vanity. That's the main line from the shower. The other two lines from the washing machine and vanity cutting in. Now here, that's the shower line. You can see the sink waste flexible hose breaking into the main line. That's my cam lock fitting on the end that just unscrews. And it's very hard to see, but that's the cam lock fitting on the left of that battery box. So there's the sink coming down under the chassis, and that runs along, and that will join into the main shower line. There we go there. So that sort of double adapt thing. Now we've got one straight pipe going across the back of the van. And then we come to the vanity and the washing machine cutting in. And here they are coming out of the floor, flexible hoses to the fittings that join into that main line. I don't know which one's which, but it doesn't matter. So once they've joined into the main line, we continue across. And there's nothing more to it. It just has a bit of a wobble to get around the battery box. And then it's out that valve that's on the end. I've just got that sitting there, but I normally have a cam lock fitting on that. The next thing I did was position the empty tank under my caravan with a trolley jack initially to get it in roughly the right spot, and then I sat it up on wooden blocks hard up against the floor of the chassis, And once I had it in the final position, just sitting on blocks, I could see that I didn't have much fall in from the main pipe to the top inlet of this tank. The tank itself is only 170mm high, so I had plenty of room. So I decided to make up a couple of spaces and drop the tank by 50mm down from the top. So it was still well above the axle of the caravan, so it was out of harm's way. So that's what I did. And while I still haven't got much fall, it's practically level, which I just wanted to minimise the amount of grey water that might sit in the system when it's all empty. What I used as spaces is 50x50 aluminium square tube, and I actually put a bit of rubber on the bottom side just to protect the tank so that it didn't do any damage once I clamped it up there. And I also, rather than long pieces of aluminium tubing, I used two shorter pieces on each side so that I could leave the John Guest hot and cold water pipes where they were just by leaving a gap through the system. You'll see that when you see the next bit of footage. There's the 50x50 aluminium piece with rubber on the bottom. They're both simply tech screwed up to the sort of the floor frame of the caravan, the steel floor subframe, I guess you'd call it. Okay, so it was going to be a lot of work to relocate all the John Guest pipework, so that was a simple fit. If I ever need to get to it, I can take the tank out. I made up some 50x50 galv angle iron brackets, 3mm thick, and I've sort of put one either side of the subfloor and put a bolt right through the subfloor chassis with a bracket on each side. You'll see that in the footage coming up. And I've got one of them in every corner of the tank where I'm going to support it. I also got some 32x5mm galv flat bar, which you can see there. And I pre-drilled that to mount onto those angle iron brackets. And then I dropped the hanger bolt through it. You've got to make sure you put those bolts through before you put the flat iron up there. And then I also folded up some 50x3mm galvanised flat bar into what I would call those U-shaped brackets to actually support the tank up there. And the sizes of those flat bar is only what the steel supplier had on special. Nothing very scientific about that. So then I mounted the tank in its final position, and once I knew where everything was going to go, I made the first cut in the main pipeline to put in the HEP-VO valve. My HEP-VO valve apparently is a bit different. This is called a MAC valve. It's the same principle. It's nothing more than a bit of rubber that, there's only one way. You'll see when I blow through it. So yeah, you've got to make sure you put that in the right way, but otherwise I cut that and installed that, and then moved on to the branching off to go to the new tank. The next step was to mount the fittings, the elbow and a piece of pipework at the inlet of the tank and dry fit my T-piece on that main line going across the back of the caravan. Once I thought I had everything, I got my things pointing at each other, I got a straight edge just to make sure they were lined up properly where I thought they were going to finish. And when I thought I had it in the right direction, pointing in the right direction, I then put that red mark on the T-piece and the main pipe, just so that when I did glue it, I had the T-piece pointing exactly at the infeed of that top inlet to the tank. Okay, so there's just my straight edge, making sure everything's all right. And once it was all confirmed, then I glued the components in. I then basically completed the installation by putting that flexible hose in, double checking that things were a-okay as far as straight. And that part of the job's done. You can see there those finished components. And while it looks like it droops there, I've got hanger brackets to go in yet. That'll pull that back up to the floor and have everything level. The last little bit of this area of the work was just to recreate that bit of a kink that I had in the original line. It was easy to get a couple of new fittings and do it again rather than you try and use the old ones. But it gave me the chance to work out exactly where I wanted my outlet to be. And I twisted those 245s to get where I wanted to get. And again, just insist that you keep dry fitting until you know exactly where it's going to go. Once they had that in the right place, then that was really ready just for the final outlet to go on. When you do install your final outlet or valve or cam lock or whatever it is, you need to be mindful that you've got to get things the right length so that the final protrusion doesn't stick out further than the side of your caravan. The final little job on this area was just to reinstall the original hanger brackets and put in a new one where I thought it needed it, just to make sure there was no vibration and everything was nice and secure. So now onto the outlet of the grey water tank. Depending on everyone's individual circumstances, you might need to put 45 degrees or whatever to try and point this outlet to where you need. The way mine landed, it came out between the battery box and the mud flap, which was not perfect, but it was certainly adequate. So it really is just a straight pipe out. That's all I've done there. So then I just popped the valve on it. The valve came with the tank when I purchased it. So same thing, got to make sure you've got things the right length so nothing's sticking out too far. But you need to put some silicone or a lubricant on these valves before you put them in. They're so stiff when they're new. I've been told that they loosen up over time, so hopefully that's right. One little job I nearly forgot was to put this plastic tube onto the air outlet on the top of the tank, and then I ran it up to the floor of the van and just cable tied it to a few things and brought it under the chassis, and I took it up inside the wheel arch because the Camper Van and Motorhome Club of Australia, their specs say that the air outlet needs to be above the lowest drain in your van, which is the shower. So hence that's why I took it up into the wheel arch. So now just a final look at the plumbing outlets on the van. There's my grey water tank outlet with a cam lock fitting and a hanger bracket just to secure it. And then on the other side I've got so that's the grey water tank outlet. On the other side of the battery box I've got my main outlet. If I was in a caravan park, I would just run that back to the drain in the caravan park. I put that cap on, just the cam lock cap, just because again, the Caravan and Motorhome Club insists that you do that so you don't leave any drips coming out if you move out of their sites. Now just finalising on the water tank that you can see there, that's the level sensor that I put in the tank. And so now I needed to wire that up. I've actually mounted the gauge which came with the kit. I've mounted that above the fridge. Had to cut the appropriate size hole and put that in there, but that's got a small AA battery, so it's not connected to any other power in the caravan. It's a separate unit, just running off a AA battery. So very easy to install. I ran the cable up to the floor of the caravan underneath, the cable tied it to a few spots, and then I bored a hole up into this cupboard underneath the fridge where the water pump is. And you'll see it in a conduit back in there. So I've run it up through a conduit and then it goes up into behind the fridge. There's heaps of room behind the fridge. So I've just secured it out of the way so it doesn't interfere with the fridge. And then it simply plugs into the back of that gauge up in there. Really quite easy to install. Just to clarify, I should point out that this grey water system of mine almost has a bypass just simply by the fact that it's got a blunt T-piece with no gentle run in. So when I'm not using the tank, I did a test run with clean water. When I'm not using the grey water tank, the water does just run straight through and out my original outlet with the valve open and the grey water tank shut off. If I open the grey water tank and shut the main valve off, it just goes straight into the grey water tank and fills normally. And then, of course, when I open both valves, water comes out of both of them. But it's really almost a bypass system without really being a bypass system. I could also have put my HEP VO valve after the vanity and washing machine, but it was a bit awkward. We never use the washing machine while we're free camping, and we rarely use the vanity when we only to do our teeth maybe, but rarely use that when we're free camping either. Well, in closing, I hope this video is of some use to anyone that does want to undertake this job, but just a few things to point out. The old rule of measure twice and cut once. I must have measured 20 times before I took the knife to anything or took the saw to anything. I probably put the tank in 10 or 12 times in and out. I would have been under my caravan 150 times. Make sure you dry fit everything you can 2 or 3 times before you actually glue anything, just to make sure it's right. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward process. Thanks.